Good evening, everyone. Many thanks for coming here. It seems like a very stupendous response to this book, which I think is very, very timely. Vikram has done absolutely kudos in launching this book just about now, because as a news person, I can tell you that this is what we're talking about virtually every day. So first of all, a big round of applause to all of you for being here. It's so good to have so many faces, young and of all hues. Many thanks, Sadguru, Madhusudan Saiji, for being here as well and gracing us with your presence. Vikram, it's a little bit painful, to be honest, to read everything the city has gone through, and wave after wave after wave. Vikram, a few words about, how was it like for you to, collect all of that history and then also see how devout the faith of the population was. They may not understand everything, for example, what Sadguru is talking about. They may not even know all the lingas you have to go to, should go to, or how they came up. Even the historical facts of how the temple was brought down multiple times, they somehow have faith. But a few words about the painful history, but also, juxtapositioned with the resilience that has been shown over the years.
Sure, Shivani, and I'll just add, or have the audacity to add something to what Sadhguruji has just said. The Puranas actually mention that anybody who goes to Kashi, their feet should be just cut off, so that the feet doesn't take you and run away from Kashi, because you've had the rarest opportunity to go to the place which gives you the best lottery ticket of salvation. And so why would you give that away to go away elsewhere and migrate? So it's quite a macabre kind of a description, but that was the importance, which was also pan-Indian, which today, in today's context, I think it becomes very important, where we talk of North-South divide. South India did not think so, North India is different, and all of that. So when the first wave of iconoclasm or breakage of all these temples and structures happened in 1194 in Kashi, with Kutubuddin Aibak's armies ravaging the place, and Hasan Nizami, one of the contemporaries, he chronicles that in just that one invasion, 1,000 temples in Kashi were destroyed, and all the wealth and gold and everything that was there in the city was taken away on 18 camels and 300 elephants. But this was 1194. But just a few decades later, in 1212, hardly 20 years after that, you had a Bengali ruler, Vishwarupa of the Sena dynasty, coming to Varanasi, and right in the heart of the city establishes a pillar on which it is written that this city belongs to Vishweshwar. So he did not have the wherewithal to rebuild the temple, because it was the height of the Delhi Sultanate, and so at least he comes and marks it, saying this is our place. And within a few decades, so Eastern India was so, invested with this. A few decades later, you had a Gujarati businessman called Seth Vastupala, who donates close to 1 lakh rupees those days. We're talking of 1240, 1250, to rebuild this grand shrine. And so the shrine comes up within 40-50 years of its demolition, first demolition. And from our own state, Karnataka, we had this Hoysala ruler, Veera Narasimha III, and the Hoysala dynasty was itself going through so much tumult at that time. Despite that, he donates an entire village called Hebbale, and the inscription clearly says, all the proceeds, the revenue that will come from this village, which I donate, that could be used by the pilgrims to go to Kashi to pay the jizya tax.
Which was put on
Hindu pilgrims. So Hindu pilgrims, if they had to go to visit their own sites, you had to pay a tax to the Sultanate. So to take care of that, a Karnataka ruler is contributing to that. So you had the west, the east and the south. They didn't think that this is Awadh, this is Uttar Pradesh, how does it matter to me? The language is different. It's nothing to do with my local, culture and language and all of that. There was a common sense of what Sadhguru mentioned, that this is the place where I'm going to get moksha. When all these iconoclastic waves happened, all the Brahmins, and Kashi being the center of Sanskrit scholarship, most of them started migrating away to South India for safety. And 4 Brahmin families, Mauna, Bhatta, Shesha and Dharmadikari, they overcome all these challenges, face the troubles, go and settle down in Kashi, to start reviving that Sanskrit scholarship there. And Narayan Bhatta comes from that same dynasty. And interestingly, Shivani, Narayan Bhatt's grandson was this man called Gaga Bhatt, who was the one who created the entire rituals for Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's Rajyabhishek. Because by then you didn't know what is a Hindu Raja, what are the rituals for a Hindu Rajyabhishek. And a person of that lineage, the Dikshit, who was there at the Pran Pratishtha of Ram Lalla in Ayodhya, he belonged to the same family. So there seems to be a continuous lineage of these Maharashtrian Brahmins who stayed there. So these tales of resilience in the wake of all those iconoclasm. So after Aibak, you had this new temple coming up, but that also was destroyed by the Jaunpur Sharki Nawabs in the 14th century, and then a large-scale demolition, complete demolition by Sikandar Lodi. And after that, about 50-60 years, the whole place was in ruins. And that was when Narayan Bhatt reconstructs the temple with the help of Raja Todarmal, who was in Akbar's service. And this Ashtamandap temple of Vishwanath was the one that Aurangzeb destroyed in 1669, between April and September of that year. So all these waves kept happening, but as was mentioned in the promo, the Hindus of Kashi never gave up. Just around the periphery, in and around the original site, a new shrine would come up. They would break that, then another shrine would come up. So it was like never say die. And compared to what happened to the Buddhist stupas and the monasteries, they were completely axed by the sword of Islamic conquest, because that depended on a monastic order. So Sarnath was right outside Kashi, and Kashi is the seat not only of Hindu faith, and in Hindu faith various panthas, whether it is Shaiva, Vaishnava, Shakta, all the traditions, but also Buddhist traditions, because Buddha gave his first sermon in Sarnath, just outside Varanasi. So the Buddhist faith was completely eliminated after Aibak's attack, but the Hindu faith, because it did not depend on a monastic order, it kept resurfacing itself. And that story of resilience, that story of pushback by common people, not necessarily kings and royalty, in the wake of all these attacks, I think that is what is the underlying theme of resistance and courage that Kashi's history brings to fore.
So while that is extremely appreciative of the Hindu community, no doubt, there is another thought this book inspires, which is how bad the Hindus have been in writing down their history, chronicling their history. So Sadguru, I want to come to you. Why is it so that Hindus don't write their history, don't leave something for their future generations which is not disputable, and therefore it is, for example, for historians like Vikram, Sampath, so difficult to even trace the history of Kashi? And why are we so bad at this? Let's accept it.
I wish we had Vikram Sampath 1,000 years ago. We would have been better off.
So once in a millennium talent, by the way.
You can say so. But I think Hindus have, Hindi में बोलते हैं ना, आम खाओ गुटली मत गिनो. You know, to bother about what is the philosophy, what is the idea, what is the context, what is the significance of whatever we are going through, all our life's experiences. And so I think we were always interested in the philosophy part of it more than facts and statistics and dates and things like that. That's Hindu culture. And because we are much deeper when it comes to life, and we look into the significance of everything, we just don't look at the surface of it. Whereas Westerners have this bad habit of documenting everything. Where they moved from here to there, in which year. That may be good now because you read history, but Hindu history is poetry. Hindu history is spirituality, basically. They looked at the spiritual aspect of everything that we did. So even in these Puranas that you have quoted, I was reading through some of them. Like you say, Shiva went into an exile because Brahma claimed his kingdom, and then he had to come back doing a trick or something like that. Yes. So my question is that we worship Shiva as the Lord of the universe, as the Atma, and things like, why would he be going to exile and come back? So the idea that Brahma is the creator. He created such situations because of which Shiva had to exit Kashi, in the sense when the invaders came in or destroyed the thing. So it is a symbolism. Our history is very symbolic. Our history is coded. And one has to decipher it for oneself by understanding the context in which it has been written. So we Hindus are not bad at recording history, it's just that that's not our attitude towards history. We looked at
Not our
history.
primary occupation.
No, not at all. And that's why we are all so bad at history. I don't know how many people got good marks in history. I never got any.
Talking about history, the reason I ask this question is because sometimes you wonder, would we be going through so much pain and contestation if we had better recorded history? Now, I don't know what the answer to that is, but it brings to light, this book also brings to light the obfuscation that has been going on till this day of what is recorded history and what is uncontested history. So if you look at not just the legal but also the social contestation of the reclamation of the temple site, you have, in this book, it's so funny, I was laughing in my head when I was going through it because every few pages some new theory would come up. And these theories would range from the fact that Aurangzeb did not demolish the last temple to that, he demolished other hundreds of temples in Varanasi, but not this. That it was, built much earlier, demolished much earlier, but at least there's an acceptance that there was a temple there. At the same time, they also insist that there was no temple there. And if Aurangzeb destroyed this temple, it was for other reasons and not religious. So you go through it and your mind is boggled as to why so many reasons come up, Vikram. And they come up to till this day in courts. Nobody is willing to accept recorded, uncontested history even.
The obfuscation that you mentioned, Shivani, I think that was all. It was there even before independence. There's one case there in 1936 called the Din Mohammed versus the state case, where it was a non-representative suit. The Hindus were not a party to it, but it was between the Muslim side and not even the Masjid committee. They in fact dragged the Masjid committee also to court. It was 5 Muslim young men who went and took the matter. They took the government to court. Saying they're not allowing us to do our prayers in the entire complex. And in that, the government gave a very clear, the British government of 1936 and 42 and all that gave a clear verdict that this is not a Waqf property. That this was not even dedicated by Aurangzeb as a Waqf property. Now, for those who may not know, you need a Waqif or a donor who can donate a property that belongs to him or her to the Supreme Allah for perpetuity. But if it doesn't even belong, it's like that Bunty Bubbly story where I go and sell Taj Mahal, which I don't own. So, it's how do you make a structure on a site that you don't have ownership of? And this was something that the British government actually took cognizance of, and the case was lost both in 1936 as well as an appeal in the Allahabad High Court in 1942. So both places it was mentioned that this is not a Waqf property. There is no farman of Aurangzeb to say, he may have had a farman to say demolish the temple, but there is no other Badshahi farman to say in its place build a mosque. And so if you see the western walls that you saw, now Aurangzeb could have very well, for the power that he was in, he was the supreme leader, so to say, of the whole country, he could have demolished the whole temple and in its place built a grand masjid. But if you see the western walls, only the shikharas or the gopurams were cut off, and in its place 3 gumbads were placed there and declared as a mosque. And every day the devout Hindus of Kashi would see that, and the amount of insult and humiliation that it would give them, that our most sacred spot, this is what has happened to it. And according to Islamic law, which in fact in the 1936 case it comes out, and the British probably don't want to enter that territory because it's very dangerous and sensitive for them. They quote Islamic law to say, you cannot offer prayers at the site of somebody else whom you have usurped. That prayer itself becomes haram. And so you cannot, if I take your house and pray, I need your consent that I'm taking your house, from today I'm going to pray there. But here there is no consent paper from the Hindu community or any Hindu Raja giving it away to the Masjid committee. So both on legal status and also the Islamic jurisprudence itself, that place was not a mosque according to what was thought of. So even when one brings all these places of worship act and so on today, what is the religious character of a place that you need to maintain as of 15th August 1947? So was it a mosque even as adjudicated by the British courts? the answer was clearly no by these two counts. So these contestations all the time kept going on.
No, but the history is certainly not in the favor of the mosque structure. The historical evidence is not in favor of the structure. Legal cases, as you mentioned, is not in favor of the structure. But Sadhguru, there is no acceptance. My only thing is I want to understand socially and psychologically, how do we go on when we stop accepting evidences? Because now they've been actually, what this book told me for the first time, there have been 2 ASI surveys. You may know about the current one, but there was one done some decades ago. And we didn't know about that survey till so long because it was so away from our popular consciousness, the Kashi struggle, not so much the Ayodhya struggle. But if we stop accepting recorded history or what we find scientifically, then what do we rely on? We're not relying on theology. We're not relying on social cues. We're not relying on legal cases. We're not relying on history. Then what do we rely on?
Probably Aurangzeb himself has to come out of his tomb and say, yes, I did this.
Not again, not again. Not Aurangzeb again in this. No, but I think what you made a point. I think probably if this was the case 100 years ago, we would have still been debating and fighting. But now with this whole democratic structure which is in place, and as we have seen in the case of Ram Lala's mandir in Ayodhya, ultimately it is the documentation, it is the proofs that were produced, finally it won the case. So I think one is that aspect. You can go on debating, they can come up with more arguments against it, and then you know how lawyers are, so you can never know when it's going to end. Probably Nandi will have to keep waiting forever. But I think if you look at the whole country as such, there are sentiments involved with every place, every community, and one needs to respect that in a country that we live in today. Somewhere in his book he mentions that in 1809 or 10, when these Lat Bhairav riots were happening, one Mr. Watson observes, and that's a very significant observation. He says that while this place is disputed and both the parties are claiming their rights over it, but if you look into it, this place holds a special significance for the Hindu community, whereas it is not so in the case of the Muslims, because this place has found mention in their Puranas, in their Shastras. For thousands of years people have come and worshipped this, and there is a record of it. Even if you don't want to go by archaeological survey and the legal documents, simply the sentiments involved with that place is more important for one community because it has a history to it, it has got ancientness and probably a religious anchoring to it. Whereas for the other community it is a very recent event, and it is not as important to them from their sentiments point of view. So I think at the end of it, I hope, literally I pray and hope that this is what would ultimately find a solution to the whole thing.
But can I say, even in Ayodhya, we said the same thing. Right. It didn't happen. So it brings me to the other question that is on top of everybody's mind. A new attempt has been pitched for a resolution out of court in, for example, Mathura or Kashi. Now, given Ayodhya's experience, do you really think it's going to happen, or do we just have to let this play out in court?
That's a very complex question. And I don't know, anybody who says anything will open himself or herself to a lot of scrutiny and controversy. You see, there's a lot of bravado even now on social media, other things, that we would want to reclaim all the temples back, 40,000 temples or so. But as a historian, while that's an ideal situation to have, but do we even know what what is the number? First of all, we don't have much idea about the numbers itself. Sitaram Goyalji did some seminal work a few decades ago, Hindu temples, what happened to them, and in that about 1860 or something, there are documented proof-based catalogue of this was the original site, the temple, and in its place this is the new shrine that has come up. So there is a documented list. Some say it's 20,000, some say it's 30,000, 40,000. So we first of all don't know the numbers, and at the same time this claim on the other side that just give us these 3, we will keep quiet for the rest, that also I don't agree with, because who is anybody to say 3 is enough or 40 is enough or 50 is enough, right? I mean, including whether it's the Sangh Parivar or the political fronts of it, I mean, they don't have the right to make these claims away on the behalf of all the Hindus. No one's given them that right. So if there is documentary evidence, so first of all, I think the Hindu community needs to put its own house in order first before making claims to anybody. Make a catalogue of the sites where for sure you know that this is what it is. So build on Sitaram Goyalji's research, produce evidence that is available, and also see how important it is. Right? Is it a site of continuous worship that has been happening, like in the case of Kashi till 1993? In the Tehkhana, the cellar, the Vyasji ka Tehkhana, puja was going on in the cellar of the mosque. On the walls of the mosque, you had Shringar Gauri's puja, which people were doing 365 days of the year. It was only in 1993 that Mulayam Singh Yadav's government barricaded that place and stopped the worship abruptly without a government order as well. So has there been a continuous worship that is happening in that site? And did our ancestors really fight for that place? That is also very important. 700 years back, there could be some place which even our ancestors gave up perhaps and said, chalo, it's okay, let someone take it. Today, to rake that up, I don't know how feasible that will be when there is no evidence, there's no continuous worship, there's no importance. And first of all, do we know the list per se? Even if you want to go and ask you, I want to reclaim this, you will ask me, tell me what do you want to reclaim? 40,000, where are the 40,000? What's the geographical locations of all this? Do you know the history of each of these 40,000? We don't know. We don't know the numbers. So Hassan Nizami, whose account I quoted, he says 1,000 temples were destroyed in Kashi. But which were the 1,000? We don't know. So it becomes a very complicated, it's a historian's job. It's an archaeologist's job to make this catalogue first and then slowly see how this can be settled. As Sadguru rightly mentioned, one has to have a little bit of large-heartedness on both sides, I feel. If the country has to be in a state of peace and harmony,